Hi everybody, my name's Ann. Thanks for joining me on Art on the Creek. You know, we're in my home studio here in Parker, Colorado, and it is Saturday, which means it is another wonderful day for a beginner watercolor lesson. So I've kind of been on a food kick for this run of lessons. We're in our second set of lessons, and today we are on lesson 7. I had to look. We're on lesson 7, and I think it's high time we paint a nice big fork full of spaghetti. Are you ready? Manja manja. So today's the day. It's spaghetti day, and that's really just about every day in our house. We eat a lot of pasta because we are Italian, but if you don't, then maybe you'll just have fun painting it. I tried to find the simplest version of spaghetti picture reference for you that I could find, and I settled on this one. It's a bit of a maze, but I have a tip for you. The reason that I showed it in black and white is because I went into my phone. I downloaded it on my phone. And then on an iPhone, you have the ability to change photos in the edit function. And I'm pretty sure you can do this on a Samsung phone too, or Galaxy. So what you do is you go to the color section, and then you want to choose either mono or silver tone or noir. I chose mono because that was the one from the reference photo that gave me the best shadows so that my eyes wouldn't get wackadoo crazy and not be able to see where the lines are. So I've already got it. I've already got it in there. I've already got it drawn for you, but it really took some time to draw, which is why I left that process off. I'll have a PDF line drawing of my interpretation of the photo. So what you see here, I will have that in a PDF so that you can trace it. That will be in the description of the video, and you just have to link on there. It's in Dropbox. Print it out, and then you can go over those lines with a Sharpie, put it on a sunny window or on a light box, tape your watercolor over it, your watercolor paper over it, and then just trace with a pencil and you'll be good to go. So in order to do that, you will need to either maybe resize it on your printer. I'm not exactly sure how to do all of that stuff, but I know it's possible. And you might have to use a bigger sheet of watercolor paper. If it does fit magically on this 5x7 sheet, then go ahead and tear it off of your block first because of course you'll need to trace. So the kneaded eraser that I used there, that's something I really recommend for this particular project. I know that it's in the supply list, but this time I really recommend it because we can shape that eraser to such a tiny little point, and we can get in there and correct whatever lines we don't need. I'm going to use tape on this one, and this time the washi tape I'm using is really pretty narrow, and I didn't quite get it all to the edge, so I might have to end up trimming it off a little bit, but let me fumble with trying to find the start. There it is, and I'll just tape this up and we'll be right back. And here goes that last edge of tape on there. When you're using washi tape, since it is a low tack tape already, make sure you kind of adhere it pretty well because it does have a tendency to want to lift up. You know, it's just, they vary. I have found that none are consistent. I don't even know what brand this is, but I do have some recommended in my Amazon store, and all the links below to products, by the way, will be affiliate links. So just wanted to let you guys know that in case you do decide to go shopping through my links. I would greatly appreciate that because I may earn a small commission if you decide to do that. And those kinds of things, the commissions and memberships, those really help to keep Art on the Creek going. So it helps me to continue to make content like this for you. You know, when I finish painting a project, I always just leave the palette open and let it dry, and I don't clean it, because I may be able to use that paint on the next painting. A lot of times you can just mix everything together and get kind of a random gray, and it goes really well for a background or shadows or something like that. But this time I wanted to change it up and start clean. So I went ahead and cleaned both sides, and that's just with a spray bottle of water. And then I'm using a piece of an old t-shirt that I've made into a rag. I ran out of paper towels a while ago, and I'm still using these t-shirt rags, and I might continue using them. I really kind of like having it. I tried using a microfiber. Is that what they are called? Yeah, a microfiber rag, and I didn't like it because it wasn't absorbent enough. So I recommend, if you're going to use a rag, use a 100% cotton t-shirt or those bamboo washcloths. I think they're bamboo, the Swedish washcloths. Those are pretty absorbent as well. So what I'm doing first is I am mixing what I normally refer to as kind of a skin tone. We want to get the color of the pasta. So it's going to look a little strange when we start, but as we go on, it's going to make a little bit of sense to you. So the first color that I'm mixing in is a Hansa Yellow Light. And I followed that up with the cadmium red, and I may have put just a touch of the Perylene Scarlet in there. The blue that I'm going to use is the ultramarine, and whenever you mix your three primaries, red, yellow, blue, you will end up with a tan or a brown. And this is the way that I always mix skin tones. You can also mix skin tones with a purple and an orange, or a purple and burnt sienna. And in fact, I did that in the members video this time. So if you're interested in checking that out, yeah, I'll probably do it again here for those of you who don't wish to become members. But if you are a member, you'll see the way that I mixed the skin tone for the hands. I used a purple and a burnt sienna. So at any rate, any kind of a reddish brown or an orange with a purple, you can get a brown or a tan, and then this three primary triad, you can definitely get a nice brown that you can adjust the quantities of the yellow or the red or the blue to create different levels of skin tone. But here we're going to use it for pasta. So when I'm painting this, I am leaving my pencil lines for you guys so that you can see as I'm painting along here. Now, when you are doing this yourself, you might want to take that kneaded eraser and roll over it just a little bit. I would recommend that you erase very lightly, because this is a bit of a brain teaser for your brain. Because your eyes, at least for me, when I found that I was working with this, my eyes had a tendency to shake back and forth a little bit because I was hyper focused on something for too long. So if that doesn't happen to you, then congratulations, your eyes are probably much younger than mine. But for those of us who have had a few candles on the birthday cake, this was a little bit of a challenge, but I really enjoyed it. You know what it reminded me of was doing a puzzle, solving a puzzle, and trying to figure out where all of the pieces go. It worked out pretty well. I really like the way that this color mix, you know, you can adjust it, like I said, for skin tones. And right here, right now, it does look like the pasta is way too dark, but just wait. As soon as we continue on with it, you'll see that the pasta ends up taking on the color of, well, pasta. It ends up looking a lot different. And this is something that will happen to you with your watercolor. You'll be painting along and doing something, and the color looks very, very wrong. Well, don't give up. Just go to another part of your painting, and then as soon as that color has a context, as soon as that watercolor wash that you've put down, as soon as it's in context, it will make more sense. You can start by painting, let's say you're painting a dog, and you start with the eyes, and they just look so intense and they're just way too strong. Well, as soon as you get the fur around them, then it will make sense. And that's true of any animal or any flower, anything that you're painting for that matter. We need, as viewers, our brains need to figure out what color things are in relation to other colors sometimes. And with paintings, that is definitely true. So in fact, sometimes we'll use colors that you wouldn't think would be the color that you would pick at all, but in context, in adjacency to other colors, our brains perceive it as the color that we intend. So moving on with the pasta here, you can see I'm trying to finish over my strokes for the pieces that are in front, trying to smooth those pieces out. It won't matter too much in the long run if you skip that step, but I just tried to have it look as though the pieces behind were behind, meaning my paint stroke didn't cross over an overlapping noodle that was supposed to be behind. I wanted to keep all of the pieces that were in front, definitely in front, so that's where I had my continuous strokes here. Now, I did not follow the reference photo exactly. I just kind of made something up that I thought would be a little bit simpler. Mine is a somewhat simplified version of the reference photo. So if you wanted to go ahead and trace exactly what the reference photo had, please go ahead and do that. You'll notice that the paint puddle that I have there is not very thick. It's about the texture of skim milk. It's very, very thin. I wanted a very light wash. I'm using a number 4 round and having no trouble with it at all. That's why I really like these Princeton snap brushes for beginner artists. They really do help you understand just exactly how much pressure to apply for your stroke, because if you were to push down too hard, then too much wash would come out. So it really helps you get that feedback, that sense of control over your paints. And also, these are really good for gouache because they don't hold that much water. They're definitely a man-made filament. So now I'm going to go ahead and work on the fork. Since I've got the pasta all entwined there, you do want to make sure that's completely dry. I did skip over that part. I don't think it's that interesting to watch a heat tool dry a watercolor painting. But then again, much of my day is spent literally watching paint dry. So there you go. Maybe it is interesting. I don't know. I've cut it out. So that was lost on the editing room floor. Let's go into this mix that we've created here for the fork. We are using ultramarine and burnt sienna. It makes a wonderful gray, and if you have it more concentrated, it can definitely be a dark going all the way to a black. We want to take a peek at that reference photo and see where the highlights are on the fork. What I did with this painting is I made the light source to the right and kind of the upper right corner. So all of the darker portions of the fork are going to be toward the left. Now, I didn't want to go crazy with the highlights, but I do have some fun things that we can do at the end on that little floral embossed pattern at the bottom that are really kind of easy to do and really give you a look that pattern is kind of 3D. So it's kind of fun. I think that when you finish this one, at least I hope that you'll be really proud of yourself, because this one really kind of feels like a bit of an accomplishment. And it is a beginner level watercolor. The only thing that's hard about it, challenging I'm going to say, is doing the drawing itself. And I really hope that with that PDF traceable, that eliminates that challenge for you, because I would really love for everyone to be able to do something like this. The other thing I could just suggest for you to make it just a tiny bit easier is to keep it big, make it bigger. If you are using a regular printer, don't resize it. Use a bigger sheet of watercolor paper. If you have 9x12 is a really popular size of watercolor paper, or a lot of them are about the size of printer paper, that 8.5 by 11 inch size. So if you want to do something like that and just keep it the size that it prints out, you'll definitely have an easier time of it. So we're going to go in and fill in all of those tiny little bits and bobs in between the spaghetti. This is a wonderful twirl of spaghetti on the fork, and you can see little bits of the fork peeking through. So on this portion underneath, I wanted to keep the fork, the metal on the fork, pretty solid looking. It's a little bit lighter on the right hand side, but to be honest, it would all be in shadow here because it's underneath the spaghetti. Now, if you look at the reference photo and you see something different, well, I will tell you time and time again, I am not a photorealistic painter. I like to take a photo and then draw it according to my artistic preferences. And I would really hope that you would do that too. But if you want to be photorealistic in your artwork, please, please continue, because that is a skill that I always say I just simply don't have the patience for. So what I'm really trying to say is, don't feel bad if your drawing doesn't look exactly like the photo. You are not a camera. So whatever artistic license you have is going to show up in your drawing, and that is a beautiful thing. Embrace it, really accept it, and go from there. I'm going ahead and filling in that bottom curve of the fork now, and I'm keeping most of the paint toward the left side. And then this might surprise you. We're going to go over that entire design at the bottom of the fork there with a wash. We're just going to make that all solid, because now remember, watercolor has a color shift when it dries. So it won't dry as dark as you're seeing it now. And when it does dry, that will be our lightest value. So I'm just going to go in and touch up these little areas here in between the pasta, and just make sure that I've got things shaded kind of the way I want. I'm just kind of playing at this point, adding a little bit darker sections down here closer to the bottom of the fork tines, and just trying to get this to finesse a little bit so that the darker portions show a bit more shadow. This part is optional. You don't have to do this part. I was just really having fun filling in these little bits and bobs of shadow, and I kind of didn't want to stop. So wanted to make sure that that rim on the left side, now that that portion at the bottom is kind of dry there, want to make sure that little rim on the left side of the fork is defined a little bit, because that helps us see that the fork is not flat like a plane of paper. It does have some depth to it, some thickness. And now you see I've mixed up more of that ultramarine and burnt sienna, and this time I'm keeping it quite thick. I want to be able to have this be a little bit darker. So I do need the concentration of that mix to be a little bit more like, heavy cream or so. And I'm going to go over that ridge line again on the left side of the fork. And now, because I can still see my drawing under there, I'm going to outline pretty much what's on this embossed design here. Now, I'm kind of keeping my lines to the left and lower side, because if your light source is at the top, that's where your shadows would be. If we have our light source at the top right, our shadows are going to be bottom left. So try and remember that when you're painting here in the shadows, and you don't have to be exactly perfect. Just think about weight. Think about if you are filling a vessel and it's tipped sideways, where is that liquid going to fill first? Well, bottom left corner. So that's where you want to put your shadows, is where that gravity would go. So let's get this completely dry and we can go to the next step. Now that we've got all of this completely dry, what we want to do is mix some sauce. But before I talk about the colors that I'm using in this sauce, I do want to mention something about those fork tines. When you are drawing them and when you are painting them, make sure you have a very steady hand, because you don't want those lines, the fork tines, to be crooked at all, because your eye will pick that up instantly. So just make sure you've got a real steady hand and practice that a little bit so that you are well prepared to draw that smoothly. This mix for the sauce, I think I used the Perylene Scarlet, maybe a little bit of the anthraquinone red, my goodness, the PR177, and then some of the burnt sienna, because pasta sauce isn't bright orangish red. It's not a rosy pink. It kind of has that, well, it's the color of tomatoes, and it's very dark. So that's why I wanted to mix in that burnt sienna. Burnt sienna is one of my favorite paints to use. It's so versatile. You can use it as a shadow or shading on a yellow sunflower leaf. You can use it with the ultramarine to mix gray. You can use it on animal fur. You can mix it with any kind of green to get a beautiful deep forest green. I think that no palette is complete without burnt sienna. And here we're going to mix it with mostly that Perylene Scarlet, and that will give us a beautiful deep dark pasta sauce. And you can see how thick I'm making this here. That is thicker than yogurt. That's really quite thick. And I wanted to get it really pretty heavy on there because I really wanted it to be a little bit more opaque. Now, watercolor is translucent. That's the nature of it. When you first start painting this, it might look a little like a horror scene. Just put that thought out of your mind and keep going with the sauce, because once you get the background on there, it will have context and it will look just fine. You might notice that I am putting the sauce towards the top of the noodles in most cases, and then kind of extending my brush beyond the line of the pasta spaghetti there, so that it has a bumpy edge, a little bit more texture. This is a very simple, easy way to put sauce on here. You could have a whole lot of fun with this. You could try splatter. There's just so much more that you could do. You could really get in there with some intense detail and replicate exactly what is on the photo. You can have so much fun with this. Putting the sauce on is really an opportunity for your creativity to shine. I wanted to keep this as simple as possible for you guys, so I'm just kind of playing here and there, putting on some more blobs of sauce wherever it seems like it would be a good idea for some sauce to be sitting. And I did also get some sauce down on the fork in some places. So just kind of keep that in mind. You just want to keep moving around, and all through this whole process I'm still using that number 4 round. We will use our stroke brush in this one, but I never did use the number 6. If you have a bigger fork, a bigger drawing, then you might want to go to that number 6 round. But for our purposes here today, I just stuck with the number 4 for this entire part. It is time for our background, and I am going to want that fork to just really stand out. So the background that I'm going to use is a Payne's Gray. This went pretty well. I cut myself short a little bit, and I will tell you what not to do, and you'll see how I run into trouble a little bit. I went ahead and I sprayed that little pan of Payne's Gray so that I could go ahead and have a good puddle to use, but I didn't create enough. This stroke brush, I always forget how thirsty it is, and once you have your pigment all mixed up, your paint mixed up there in a little puddle, then the brush swallowed so much of it up that I didn't have enough left to create the background for the whole thing. I really do recommend using the stroke brush because you can really get into some narrow spaces with it, more so than you'd think. I'm holding my hand on my head, and I don't always do that when I paint, but when I do, I make sure that I've got my pinky up. I was deep in thought. And then you're going to want to go ahead and pick up the painting and move it around so that you can get these edges filled however you can, just the best way that you can do it. And if you're right-handed, then of course you can do it the way that I've done it. And if you're left-handed, well, that would be the opposite. I am sorry that my head keeps getting in the way. Hopefully it won't detract from the focus. I was really concentrating on this part, and I think you probably will too. In fact, some of the time I think I was actually holding my breath. Be careful around the tips of the tines of the fork. You don't want to leave any white space, and you want to come as close to that fork that you painted as possible. I did leave a little tiny highlight on the tip of the fork, and I wanted to make sure that I left that intact. So you see, when you get down here, you can use that stroke brush on its corner. You can use it on the corner to get into the tiny little crevices, and then it has such a beautiful edge that it works so well going in between the tines. When I do a final coat on this, when I do the final wash rather on this this little painting here for the background, I did end up going in with a number 4 round in between the tines, just to kind of spread it quickly. That's the other thing about working with backgrounds. This is kind of a large area that you're working with, and you kind of do need to go quickly. So it's a little bit of a challenge to go quickly and be precise at the same time. And I think a stroke brush is still really a good way to go here because you can create a really precise edge. And that's definitely what we need right here along these tines. We don't want to lose them. We don't want to make them disappear. But with a round brush, that would have increased our chances a little bit of making those tines not quite as straight. So think of that when you are painting. If you're going to paint something that has straight lines, like a building or, I don't know, some kind of a mountain or anything that is man-made, some kind of I don't know why I'm thinking wheelbarrow, but wheelbarrow, you're going to want to use a brush like this, a straight edge brush. Use a straight edge brush to create straight edges or paint up against straight edges. If you want to paint leaves or something, maybe you want to switch to a round brush. I would spend some time with your brushes. Just set aside some time and play with all of your brushes and see what kind of different strokes that you can get from them. There's a lot of videos out there that do brush stroke tutorial. I'm not going to do one of those for you here on the channel because I personally believe that it's better just to experiment and figure out which brush that you want to use for which effect that you want to create. Because for instance, if you have a stroke brush set the right way, if it's got, if it's really dry and you splay out the bristles, it's perfect for making grass. That may not be the recommended use of a stroke brush that you find on a video. So I think that it's best to just play and experiment. But in general, if you're going up against something smooth or straight, stroke brush, way to go. It can also get into some really fine areas too. But that little white space that's left in between the fork and that stray pasta, I'm going to go back in with this number 4 round here and fill that in. The trick to getting your background to looking okay, and this is where I think I came up just a tiny bit short on this one, so I do apologize to you guys. Maybe your backgrounds will look smoother than mine. is to create enough paint. That is number one. And I didn't do that. I was too excited. You know, best laid plans, do as I say, not as I do, all that sort of stuff. All I can tell you is I'm human. Anyway, the thing that I would recommend to you is that you make plenty of paint. Make enough so that you don't have to replicate the consistency, because that's what keeps your background wash looking even, is that you can cover it not only quickly and smoothly with each wash, but also with the same consistency of paint. So you could go in, dry this off completely, and then go in with a second wash. But for me, where I live, by the time I got around to a full circle on the painting, it had dried completely. So I'm going to go in, and this is what I like to do for the second wash. I start by doing a vignette of sorts. So you can see I'm filling in the corners and a little bit on the edges. And I'm just still using the stroke brush to do this. And then I will take that pigment and pull it in down along the edge. So this is a good way to fill in your wash. I do like doing it this way. I feel like that I should have mixed more paint, and I think that would have solved all of my problems. It's certainly not bad. I didn't make a dreadful error doing this. I just think that it would have looked a little smoother had I mixed enough paint in the first place. So at this point in the painting, I'm fully realizing that my brush strokes are going to show. I'm not going to have a smooth wash. So I'm embracing that. And you see how I'm using that stroke brush to kind of pull away from the fork? That's going to give this background a little bit of energy. It's going to give it a little bit of something, because those brush strokes are going to be visible. Now, this may vary also if you're using different paper, different brand of paints. I'm using the Paul Rubens. It's the one that I'm recommending for this time around. If you were doing this with the Winsor Newton Cotman paint, or any paint, Sennelier, whatever it is you're using, you may not have this issue with the paints. Every paint is different, every paper is different, and every artist is different. So depending upon if you've got enough pigment mixed or not, or what level of viscosity you have that pigment mixed to your paint, you're going to end up with just slightly different results. So don't be shy. Go ahead, jump in with both feet, and if it works, great. If it doesn't work, it is only paper. Set it aside, walk away, try again another day. Yesterday, I came down here to my studio and I thought, oh, I'm going to paint this. I'm going to have the best day. Everything's going to turn out great. Do you know how many paintings I threw away yesterday? 5. I couldn't get anything started. Everything was a problem. And then, of course, we had some work done around the house, and the installers were clomping their feet around, and it picked up on all of my recordings. So it was just a day where I decided, you know what? I'm not going to get work done today. The universe is telling me I need to do something else. And sometimes when you're painting, that happens with every creative pursuit, actually. Sometimes, you just feel like you're just trying to, gosh, can I just make something work? If you ever have that thought in your head, or if you ever feel that it's just never going to work and you're never going to get this figured out, maybe you won't get it figured out today. So set things down, clean up your space, do a little bit of organizing. I found that helps me. I don't know why, but it does. When I have days like that, I like to kind of do a thorough clean of my studio and just kind of walk away from it, maybe for a day or two. And then maybe when you come back, things will just be a little bit easier. And I know I've used a heat tool to dry all of these steps. If you don't have one, just walk away from your painting and make sure it's thoroughly dry before you come back. And with that, it is time for our high highlights. I'm going to try a Prismacolor white colored pencil first. I wanted it to be kind of soft. Now, I have a couple of gel pens out there you can see, and I just thought that those highlights, sometimes they're a little bit too harsh, and sometimes they don't show up very well. The gel pen on the right is kind of dead. I need to get rid of that one. And then the other one, it was just a little bit too watery, so I think it might be on its way out. I'm just kind of playing with this pencil here, and I'm not really satisfied with what I'm getting. So I'm just going to abandon this pursuit and go right into the bleed proof white. Now, this is in the supply list. It's totally optional. You do not have to buy this, but I really like it. Now, here is something that I'm recommending that you use if you are going to use this for your high highlights. If you use a rigger or a liner brush, it's just going to be that much easier. You'll be able to have a lot of paint that you can use without having to redip. and you will be able to have a good amount of control on your stroke. So now remember the analogy I gave you before about that vessel and the gravity, the weight of it is the bottom. That's where the shadow is going to be. So again, our light is in the upper right corner. So if we're holding a cylinder or vessel and we're filling it with water, where the bottom of it is at the lower left corner, that's where the shadows are. Well, the highlights are going to be toward the top right. Just think of light that way. Think of light that's something that literally pours across your painting. And sometimes that gives you a little bit of an analogy that makes it easier to think about where to put the highlights. So as long as you keep them toward the right, in this one you'll be fine. And then down there on the filigree on the fork, keep them toward the right top. And you know, you don't have to be exact. Just do little curves here and there. Try and put the highlights where you think the light would hit it, and it will come out looking pretty darn good. I think the real thing to remember when you're doing shadows and highlights like this to create a 3D effect is don't overthink it. That's all there is to it. It's really that simple. Now, whenever I take washi tape off, no matter how low tack it is, I always like to use a heat tool to put it just ahead of where I'm pulling and then remove the tape at a 90-degree angle from your paper, because you don't want it to tear the paper. You do go very slow, but as you're pulling it, you'll be able to feel if there's any resistance at all. And if there is, just go very, very slowly and try and heat up that adhesive to get it to dissolve. So here we go. There's our spaghetti. Doesn't that look good? I see here you can see the little starburst effect of the brushes. It kind of gave it a neat bit of energy. So, you know, for all the struggles of not making enough paint and in my little puddle for the background there, worked out just fine. So I'm going to go ahead and sign this, and I recommend that you always do the same. Sign the front of your work. You can sign it in the border, sign it on the painting, however you want to do it, and be sure and date it, because that'll give you something to look back on and remember where you were on that part of your artistic journey. And I'm just taking the heat tool to dry that ink where I signed it, because I want to go ahead and take this off of the block, and I will show you how to do that here. I have this little device. It's a leaf. It's plastic, and I like it. It came with another pad of paper that was in a block format, but you can use anything at all. A plastic picnic knife, a plastic palette, a bone folder, anything like that. I don't recommend using metal, because I have used metal to remove these sheets from blocks before, and the metal has scratched the paper that you're leaving behind, and that's your next painting. That's your next painting, and you don't want to have Mars on the paper before you start. So I used a very thin washi tape here, and you can see all around the edge I got some of that Payne's gray. So if I do put this in a frame, it won't be a problem at all. If I want to trim it off, that will be absolutely fine. You don't have to worry about something like that. You can also use thicker washi tape if you want, and let it hang off the edge of your paper just a little bit, and that will alleviate that problem entirely. You guys, thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I hope you really enjoyed this painting of spaghetti, and I hope that now all of you know what you're going to have for dinner tonight, because pasta is always a good choice. Take care, everyone. We'll see you next time. Bye now.